Welcome to the online conference on truth organised and hosted by the Aristotelian Society. I'm Guy Longworth and I'll be in charge of moderating comments during the conference. The conference was put together to celebrate 125 years of the journal, The Proceedings of the Aristotelian Society. And our idea was to look back over the back catalogue of that journal and to pull out papers that we think are worthy of either new or refreshed discussion. So the way the conference is going to work is that each day of the conference we're going to post one of the target papers together with a specially commissioned commentary on that paper. And then when those are posted, we're going to open the floor for general discussion. So please do get involved with that. Really welcome people making comments, raising questions, and perhaps attempting to reply to other people's comments, deal with other people's questions. So we had two main aims in selecting texts for the conference. The first aim, with respect to the older and better established pieces, was to try and encourage people who haven't read them to read them for the first time, and to encourage people who perhaps have read them to go back to those pieces with fresh eyes. And that was one of the governing aims of commissioning the commentaries on the papers, to try and suggest ways in which these pieces are perhaps more difficult to understand than we've thought, and perhaps ways in which they bear continuing relevance to contemporary discussions of the nature of truth. So the hope with respect to some of the older and better established pieces is that people will revisit them, read them carefully, perhaps for the first time, recently, and that in the hope that in revisiting these texts we might find things in the text that we hadn't seen before, either in other work or in our own earlier readings of those texts, and also that doing so might help to illuminate the issues that those texts were trying to deal with. With respect to the more recent pieces chosen for the conference, our aim was slightly different in that those pieces haven't yet been given the level of attention of the more classic texts we've selected. So our aim with respect to the more recent texts was to encourage people to spend some time thinking about them, thinking about their major themes and perhaps some of the details of those pieces. So there, for example, there are some quite radical themes, for example in Peter Geach's paper, Truth and God. In that paper, Geach makes the radical proposal that truth is to be identified with God in order to explain just why truth has the distinctive value for us that it does. And that might be seen as an unorthodox view about the nature of truth, or perhaps an unorthodox view about the nature of God, or both. And whatever one thinks about that precise conjecture that truth is God, our idea was that it would repay reflection to think about how that might deal with particular problems about the value of truth, and what one might say to deal with those problems if one thought it were right to reject that view about truth. This seems to be a radical and potentially interesting idea about truth that hasn't really been picked up in contemporary discussions. And whatever one thinks of that specific conjecture, you might think that there must be something to learn from the fact that a philosopher of Geach's stature was led to it, perhaps something to learn about the difficulty of problems surrounding the value of truth. So those anyway were two of our main aims in putting the conference together. Our overarching aim is that we should have a useful, interesting and enjoyable discussion. So I hope you'll consider getting involved in that discussion. Please do. Thanks.